Call order of a work session of the Goodyear City Council to May 2007. 6 members of the council are in attendance this evening. Council member Antoniak has personal business, and he will not be with us this evening. We have one item on our agenda. It's, however, it's multifaceted, and that is we'll receive an update regarding the spring training project, and I believe Brian will start this one off.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. It's always a pleasure to get in front of you and talk about baseball in this particular project. And first, though, I do want to thank each council member for arranging within your schedules for this meeting tonight. This was one of those opportunities where we had Cleveland Indians in town. We have JMI Sports. We had the availability of Gus Rosenfeld, and we've all been working on these projects the last couple of days. So we thought it was an excellent time since we had everyone here to try and bring that before council. So very appreciative of sacrifices you made to be here. The things we're going to cover tonight, we plan on, and I'll go through an agenda in a few minutes, but generally we plan on giving you an update, and we're going to be bringing forward to you several agreements, talk about the concepts of those agreements, the business points of those, the zoning. We're certainly going to talk about that as well tonight too. And at this point, while we have been working closely with the mayor and council, we think it's important to give policy direction as we finish up these agreements and documents. And it was our fear that if we brought that before council in May at a council meeting, it wouldn't do justice to allow you perhaps the time you needed to really digest and provide us input. So that's what we're here tonight for. I'm going to show the proximity and some of the things that, and I appreciate your indulgence, but I'm going to go quickly where the location is and also about the history. And the reason is, I guess, as much as anything, to memorialize the events that have happened very quickly, so we have it in one presentation to council. And we think for the viewing public that will be certainly looking at this, and perhaps our newest council member have an opportunity to really see what's happened over the last really couple of years. What's in front of council right now, this is it's an aerial of the area. Right in the dead center of this is City Center. And to the north of that, the bright red line is Interstate 10. And so south of Interstate 10, about 2 miles, you go just south of the City Center into those 2 green parcels called Woods and Wood Corporate Campus. These are the 2 areas where we'll be having both the ballpark and also the spring training facilities. So in reference to where we're at just in terms of vicinity, that's where we're at. On the history portion, wanted to spend just a few minutes on that, and we borrowed the idea from our finance director as far as outlining the different topics that have happened and the different agreements that have come before council. We actually go back to September 2004, and that was a passage of the $10 million bond issue by our public, and that was by about a 2-to-1 margin. First time that that's been done in metropolitan Phoenix area to get the public input. Fast forward to January 2006, that's when we really started looking at this. We had worked with the California Los Angeles Angels, stay with their name, and that, of course, they ended up expanding in Tempe. So we worked through that, and they ended up again staying in Tempe. And it was at that point where, under the mayor's leadership and the support of council, said, "Go get baseball. Let's try this again." So that's where we really started to bolster our efforts and go after this opportunity. So in January, we sent a request out to essentially get free land or discounted land for a ballpark and training facilities. We knew that we were going to be looking at about 120 acres for 2-team stadium, 75 acres for a 1-team complex. So what we did is we did go out to the landowners that were in proximity to Interstate 10, fairly proximate to the city center. And what we received were, we received 3 submittals, and that was in the next box you see there in March. We received 3 submittals from that. 1 dropped out, and then we heard the proposals that both those developers had given us. Wood, of course, was selected along with Rose Properties, JMI Sports. So that happened in March. And at that point, we also received direction from the council to proceed with negotiating the agreements, or the project, if you will. And I'm pleased to say that we have maintained that all the way through this project. So I think that's important to point out. March through August, so we had the land, and now it's okay, we have the land, now we need a team, and we prepared excellent marketing materials. Those have been before council. We got on the phone, we called, we used one of our partners, Eric Judson with JMI Sports, and we were really pounding the pavement in trying to secure a second team out of the Grapefruit League. We knew that we did not want to go to the Cactus League, so we stayed with the Grapefruit League. And then I think, point back to the mayor, I think it was a golf outing that the mayor was involved in where he got a tip, if you will, or a opening door to the Cleveland Indians, and we took good advantage of that. So, Mayor, thank you very much for that. And, of course, we wouldn't let that rest once we had that door open. And so during that time, again, it was in September that we ended up having agreement with the Cleveland Indians, and that was on the memo of understanding. And that was also where we brought the financing before council and received tentative approval to proceed based on those financials. The other thing is we needed to then proceed with getting it was important to get memos of understanding with both the Wood family and then also with the Cleveland Indians to then go forward to the Sports and Tourism Authority to receive the funding reimbursement from them. So we knew that we needed to get those MOUs done. An MOU is nothing more than an agreement for the framework for a contract that will be happening a bit later, but it really gets us through the spirit of the negotiations. It's part of that process. The September through December timeframe, there was a shift. We actually, at that point, we kind of stopped focusing on the project itself, and we focused on the Sports and Tourism Authority. Again, with the mayor and certainly the council, we worked with a variety of consultants to secure that funding, and we ended up with a memo of understanding from the STA in December. The importance of that is our agreement with the Indians was that we would have confirmation from the STA by the end of the calendar year, which would have been expired December 31st. So that's why there was a push to get that memo of understanding done with the Sports and Tourism Authority to fund $37.5 million toward the project. And in January, we were able to then put that in a intergovernmental agreement, and that day was January 17th, not that I would remember, 2 o'clock, January 17th, 2007, and that's when we had the IGA approved with the STA. That point, it really cranked up the clock, and we knew that we were going to get the funding. It was to really make our project work, and from that, then we've really been working hard with a lot of folks to keep this moving. March, we completed, due to the complexity of the project, and if you think about, and you'll see that tonight as we talk about the specifics of where we're going with this, but the complexity is, there are a lot of things, a lot of issues that we're working through. So we ended up doing another memo of understanding with Rose Properties, JMI Sports, to essentially come up with a framework for the mini agreements that you're going to be hearing tonight, the mini agreements that are required as part of this project. So we had so we got that completed. We also were able to hire HOK, and they're working on design now, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So now we're in April. In April, we got the development management agreement done, and the biggest reason for that, the development manager is going to manage a project with the Indians, with the Sports and Tourism Authority, with the architect, the contractor, the city, the consultants, and they really will be working on this one-of-a-kind project. So we know we have that expertise on hand. That agreement was approved by council. We also approved the contract with Barton Mallow, which will be coming up with the cost estimates, the cost model for this project. We would then look to enter into a future agreement with them to actually construct. So now we're in May, we're standing before you, And what we'll be bringing for you tonight that you'll see on your slides are the zoning, development agreement associated with the zoning, the use agreement with the Cleveland Indians, the land conveyance, and the infrastructure agreement. So these are the remaining majority moving parts. It's important to point out that if one of these is not, we do not reach agreement on any one of these, the project stops. So it's very important for us to keep every one of these moving, and we have a variety of people working on each one. So you're going to be hearing from them tonight, and we really, as much as anything, look forward to the input that we've received from council. So tonight, presentation overview. First couple of items are going to be information. We will have a project update from now I think he's a Hall of Famer, as the mayor's quoted, Eric Judson, or one of them is quoted. But he will be giving us a project update, and I think you're going to be quite pleased with the progress we're making. The other thing is we'll hear about from the Parks and Recreation staff what we're looking at putting into this facility. It's important that we know beyond baseball what's going to be at the ballpark, the other types of uses that we get out of this community asset. So you're going to begin to understand what we're planning, at least to date, on the other types of uses that would go into the ballpark. So that will be presented by Jennifer Campbell. Indians Use Agreement, we have Keith Hoskins, who many of you may remember from the Improvement District up on the McDowell Road corridor. And he will be talking about the use agreement that we're getting across the finish line with the Indians. Land conveyance and infrastructure agreements will be covered by Scott Ruby. And then we're going to finish with the zoning part of things. This has been presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so you're going to hear that presentation on the zoning tonight, followed with the development agreement that's a component of that zoning. So we have a busy night. I'm going to sit down and let the other folks come up and present, but we do look forward to your comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, members of the council, mayor. My name is Eric Judson, and I'm representing Goodyear Baseball, LLC. I'm with my partner, John Ruggieri, here, and our project executive, Casey Rank. It's wonderful to be before you and talk about the implementation of a project tonight, rather than just talking about the dream of a project. So I'm going to give you a brief overview as to kind of where we are today, introduce some of the team members that are working so hard on the project, and hopefully provide you some insight as to where we're going in the future. First of all, Brian was here. I know he's going to point to the rest of his team later tonight, but he's got a terrific group working with him. So we've got a great integration with the team from the city, and it's really our job at Goodyear Baseball to make sure we represent you very well. And I think that's important, not only in the sense that we've got expertise, but we've got to be integrated with the people who are here on the ground who really understand how this will make the city great. We also have the Cleveland Indians here tonight. It's great to have a couple new members to the team. You've met Paul Dolan, the president, the Dolan family, the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Dolan, terrific people. Joe Zendarczyk, who is their attorney, who grinds us every day on the use agreement and other elements, but a terrific partner in this process. They have a very deep team, and we have two of the great ones here tonight. We have, first of all, Jim Folk, who's the Vice President of Operations for the Indians. He's been with the Indians a number of years, worked with them on the development of Jacobs Field, where they play today, so he's got a great deal of experience in major facility development, and he's one of the real gurus in terms of operations around Major League Baseball, and very well respected in that sense. We also have Neil Huntington, who's the Special Assistant to the General Manager. I will tell you, no one in the game of baseball knows spring training more than Neil Huntington. He's been looking at spring training facilities for 8 years, and he has a program that he delivered to us really before we got started, but then as we got started, that is more detailed than anything you might imagine in terms of identifying what the Indians are looking for and how this will be a great facility for them, because as I'll talk about, it's really a year-round facility for them, and one that they believe will be not just a spring training facility, but really a second home. So Neil Huntington is here tonight as well, and he's a great resource for us. As Brian indicated, we have hired HOK Sport. They're out of Kansas City, as most of you know. They are the premier sports facility design company in the world, and we're very pleased to work with them, and I have a lot of experience in working with them on other projects as well. Barton Mallow also has joined the team. They're our general contractor, CM at Risk. They have more experience in Arizona in developing spring training facilities than any other general contractor. So hopefully what I'm identifying to you tonight is a team that has a great deal of experience, and the depth of the group that you'll be dealing with will certainly be able to provide you with the best insight possible to get the best facility possible. We had our first pitch, as we call it. Someone called it a kickoff meeting. I think Brian quickly said, this isn't football, this is baseball. We got the team together. The Cleveland Indians, of course, were here. The entire city team sat through the meeting. We had Barton Mallow and HOK, along with our team from Goodyear Baseball, sit in a 2-day session, really as the first pitch, kicking off the effort here. I used the kickoff term, I'm sorry. But really starting this process, which will be a long one, but it's very important to get an important first step, a good first step. So we certainly did that. We talked about program. We talked about reporting relationships. We talked about how we were going to collaborate together. And again, it was almost a partnering session in the sense that we talked about how the city needs a terrific outcome. They're talking about a civic center that will be here for decades to come, and it's so aligned with the Indians that they're talking about having the best facility in Major League Baseball for spring training. And at that point, we called it, I think it's important to kind of identify what our vision is, our goal is here. This is a development complex. It's not just a spring training complex where they're here for 30 days a year. This is a development complex where they're going to have people here year-round and use this as a really important asset for them to help differentiate themselves from other teams, not only in their division but all of baseball. So this is a team, this is a family that's very committed to this valley, I think, at this point, and see the importance of this facility to their overall success. So we had that meeting on the 12th and 13th, very successful. Today, we in fact had the fruition of that meeting come to bear. We had another design meeting to start talking about some of the elements that I'll point to in just a second, but we're going to start seeing on every 2 weeks we're going to have a design meeting where we start to see the evolution of this plan. So we just get a little bit further, then we're going to start to be able to share some of that with you. Tonight we just want to talk more about the process. The basic elements that we're looking at, and I think just to give you contextually what the subjects are, is important. As you know, we've been talking about this grand vision for the spring training complex. We've been talking, and I know John Ruggieri will address the importance of the private development, Ballpark Village, and how that's integrated into each other. And that's really the groundbreaking element of this overall complex. But we, from the specific facility standpoint, have to focus on a few key elements. That includes, at this point, and you see on your screen, the site plan first. We've identified where the practice facilities are going to be. We've identified the ballpark. We need to see how all of those relate to both pedestrian and vehicular traffic. We need to see from the Indian standpoint where their clubhouse is in relation to the training facilities, which include the clover leaf that will be used for the city when the Indians are not using it, and then the major league practice facilities. Parking, access from the practice facilities up to the ballpark. All of those site-related planning elements are being discussed. We're also talking about the clubhouse, and the amount of detail, again, that we've already gotten into is impressive because the Indians have very specific recommendations and ideas as to how they want this home to be for them. They've got their most important assets, their players, training down here, certainly through spring training, but the rest of the year, so it needs to be very effective for them and be laid out in the best possible way. So we're spending a lot of time on that clubhouse. You've probably seen the documents. The city is committed to a 38,000 square foot clubhouse for the Indians. The Indians pay for every square foot above that, and they take that very seriously. But they might in fact add square footage to make sure that this is the best possible facility for them. So that's another important element. Then, of course, the ballpark, and this is probably the most complicated piece of it because we are doing something so different, and that's the integration of private development into this civic asset. But we're making progress on that. We're making sure that, most importantly, on day one, and I'm going to talk about the schedule in a second, that this is a fully functional, completely operational spring training facility for baseball. And it's going to be something you're all proud of. But we can't lose sight of the fact that that development needs to be closely integrated into that, not only on day one, but in year 5, in year 7, in year 10, as all the development comes to this area, not only in the Civic Center, but in the Ballpark Village. So very complicated, but one that I think we're up to the charge in solving those problems. From a schedule standpoint, Just some broad categories. Design. We've started design. We're really in the programming stage right now. We'll go through schematic design all the way through construction documents from April until January 2008. Our construction will start in September of 2007, just around the corner. We'll be pushing dirt out there on the site. Then we have the opening of the development complex. We've talked about how we're going to break up the openings slightly. Initially, there was even a broader gap between the spring training or training facilities being opened and the main ballpark. We've been able to shrink that really with the cooperation of the Indians, which will be helpful for us because now our construction timeline is tighter, which is in fact gives us economies. It's more cost effective for us to do it that way. So we're going to benefit from that. So the development complex will be open in August now of 2008. When initially it was April, and now the ballpark I guess the ballpark is still going to be opening on February 2009. We've got the team very focused on these dates. We know how important it is to each of you to make sure that we design a magnificent facility, but it's got to be on time and on budget. And that's absolutely the spirit of all of our discussions, and making sure that it is a great facility for the Indians, for the city of Goodyear, for the surrounding development. We want to deliver it in a way that you're proud of. So I think we're making great progress. We really are, and we look forward to many more updates along the way as we continue down this path towards a great culmination of all of our efforts. So with that, I did want to offer an opportunity for the Indians to come up and at least say hello, and again, the couple more members of the team, and maybe make a few comments on the process and maybe how excited they are to be here. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I just want to say how thrilled I am that the Cleveland Indians have selected me to be one of the project managers from our end to work with this terrific team that you've put together. And this project that you have had the foresight and the wisdom to pull together, in looking at spring training sites and the various projects that have come together in recent years, the planning that's gone into it, the forward thinking that's gone into it, the creation of this team that Eric just described, you've got the best designer that there is, without question. You've got a terrific construction manager. You've got an outstanding developer who's got great insight and great project management skills. I'm going to steal a little bit of Neil's thunder. He says he and his wife try to look to the future and what's it going to be in 5 or 10 or 15 years. And I can only imagine, just from what I've seen so far, that the way that this project is working already, that when it opens in a little less than 2 years, you'll have you'll have without a question the best spring training site. And 10 and 15 years down the road, I think this is going to remain the model that other spring training sites are going to look for. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Neil Huntington. I'm primarily in the baseball operations portion of the Indians, and on behalf of the Indians, and in particular the baseball operations department, I want to let you know how humbled we are to be a part of such a tremendous project, to be humbled to be a part of such a tremendous team that's been put together. I can't begin to express how excited and how appreciative we are to be a part of this community as we go forward with this project and as we go forward from here on out. This facility, as Eric talked about, for us is not a spring training complex. This is not something we're coming out here for 6 weeks and we're leaving at the end of 6 weeks and we'll see you again in 11 months. This is something that will be a competitive advantage for us. We hope it's something that you will be tremendously proud of, but for us, we're excited about the competitive advantage. We want to share the facility as much as we possibly can, but we are looking to have our players. We're hoping to have our staff. We're hoping to have a strong 12-month-a-year complex. We're hoping to have a strong 12-month-a-year presence, and we are just so excited to become part of your community. And as Jim talked about, sometimes we wish we could press that fast-forward button and be moving out here and opening such a wonderful facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, gentlemen, evidently this enthusiasm have gotten to the players because you now are in first place in your division. And you're getting those 1-run games, and yesterday a 12-run game. Fantastic. So evidently the players are enthusiastic about this move too. So
Speaking respectfully for our present site, they are very excited.
Thank you very much, and very glad to have you here. Brian, is it all right if we have more of an open session here and ask questions as we proceed? I mean, I'm sure there's questions on the ball field. We may as well get Eric while he's up there. So, and also from the public, if you have any questions, just please raise your hand, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself and ask the question. So, any questions on this?
About the ball field so far?
Yes. Okay.
no, Mr. Mayor, I expressed my concern to Eric on several occasions. I think it's important. It's important to the council that this project stays on course, and I'm glad to hear what you're giving the council this evening. And it certainly appears that you're doing just that. We don't want to end up with egg on our face, as I told you earlier in the year, and I don't think we're going to come to that point. I just want you to stay there and make Goodyear project proud of what the project you're bringing to us. And I can see the enthusiasm that the Indians have, and certainly we here on the dais have the same enthusiasm. I am a baseball fan from year one. Although it's not with the Indians, with the Pittsburgh Pirates. It was with the White Sox, but now it's with the Indians.
Yeah, good. I did one of my charges tonight as Brian was discussing my part. He told me, make sure you introduce them as the first place Indians. So, Brian, I'm sorry that I didn't get a chance to do that. If I could just make one comment. We've got a great team in place, and I've already stated that. This is a great project, and I've stated that. I probably didn't give enough emphasis to how complicated this project is. What we are conceiving here, what we are going to be implementing with a tremendous team from the city and a tremendous development partner in the Wood family and Rose Properties is as folky, as we call them, says state of the art. It's beyond anything anyone's ever contemplated before. So this is more challenging than any other spring training facility ever. But I think we've got the team in place to implement that, to achieve it exceptionally well. So it's not going to be without a lot of hard work. We're not coasting at this point. We're just getting started, and we will remain committed to on budget, on time, and delivering a great facility to the city of Goodyear.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
Hi, Eric. This is really for Brian and or Eric, but we're talking about on time and on budget, and I'm just want to make sure if you're going to be coming back, is it in your plan to come back to council periodically with your project updates? And do you have a schedule for that? Are we going to hear from you once a month, once every 6 months, only when you're in trouble? Or and it is a big project, and I think we have a great deal of respect for that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Holland, absolutely. We will try and wear out our welcome in communicating, and what we have thought about is there will be a report certainly that's coming out of Goodyear Baseball LLC that comes, the progress reports that will be coming to us, to staff, and we'll forward on to council. So we are looking at that coming out monthly, and we would certainly look at other opportunities to come before council and work session environments too. We want to keep you informed. And we do not want surprises. We've tried to avoid those, and we will continue to. So it's really up to the council. If we're not getting you enough information, give us a call, and we'll make sure that we do a better job.
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't have any surprises. That's
Exactly.
all we need to do is be caught off guard by one of our constituents that has heard something, and it's very awkward. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Just one comment. I was of the understanding that in order to get these ball fields ready, that you had to break ground by May 1st, and that was yesterday. And I heard that earlier this year. Evidently, that's not the case. The September date is okay.
Yeah, we just, Casey and I, about an hour ago, were sitting down with our CM at Risk team and constantly checking the schedule, and we'll be giving you numerous updates in that regard. But we think we've got not a schedule with a lot of fluff in it by any means, but we've got adequate time to deliver this. But again, I think it's I'm going to go back to the point I made a moment ago, and Brian is coming today to you with a huge team. All the complicated documents that are going into this is so much greater in complexity than anything any other spring training facility has ever had. We've got to make sure the private development is provided the opportunity to stay with us as well. So we have plenty of time. We'll get it done. We'll deliver it. But in order for it to be fully integrated with everything else, all these other projects have to, or agreements have to go forward at the same time.
Well, we have to make sure that our team, the city, is stepping up to the plate, and everything is on schedule, because we can't let this take the back seat to anything else. Not at this point, unless it's something very critical. But at this point, this is out front, and it should stay out front as far as the development of this project. So I hope there will be no problems with this.
Right.
At least on our side.
Sure.
Anybody's side, yeah. Eric, talk to us a little bit about grass. What grass are we going to have in the stadium? And then you got winter grasses and you got Bermuda summer grasses here. The latter is going to take really a couple of years to fill in well, and yet on maybe 1 March 2009, we're going to be in front of people introducing this. It has to look good, the whole thing, and the grass is crucial.
Right.
How about getting, what's the issue? There seems to be an issue to me. Is there? Or is
I don't believe there is an issue. Another one of our topics we had moments ago about whether or not we're going to bring in sod or if we're going to sprig it and we're going to seed it and grow it on site. The Barton Mallow team, as I said, has been involved with virtually, I think, the last 4 spring training facilities here. The project team we have in place is the same project team that just got off the Scottsdale's new renovation. They were in Surprise. They were in Peoria. They are absolutely focused on the field as one of the critical schedule elements. And we're talking about, Bermuda grass that could be shipped in. We could grow it there, but we'll give you a schedule update that gives you a level of comfort that we're going to have the right grass in place, in time, to have it look beautiful for you on that opening day as you dress. And real importantly, too, if we open the practice facilities in April 01, as we intend to do, these guys are going to, in August of 08, these guys are going to come and start playing on it. The Indians will have players on that shortly after they move their operations from Florida here to Goodyear.
and that's going to be real grass.
Absolutely. All of it.
And usually Bermuda takes a little while to establish itself.
That's right. I would tell you, I talked to you about a couple of the team members, the key players, but the number of sub-consultants, the number of engineers and technicians that are involved in this project, it's enormous. The list is very long. So we've got grass experts that will be holding our hand. We won't be doing this on our own. We'll have good guidance in that regard.
And the stadium is an artificial or real grass?
Real grass, absolutely.
In your stadium?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jennifer Campbell, Recreation Superintendent, Public Works. As you know, this will be a spring training facility, and the Cleveland Indians are there, and we're building them a new home. Staff has come up with some different proposed uses as well, because we do want this to be a year-round venue, and we do want the community to be able to use it as well. Some of the proposed uses will involve corporate uses, private uses. It will involve adult sports, youth sports, a new home for the city special events, different events as well, concerts, graduations, even weddings, things like that. We want to make sure that this facility is definitely community use, that we can have toddlers in there all the way to seniors, but we do understand that the Indians definitely need priority. They have their needs. We want to make sure that they're met, and we also want to see that the community needs are met as well. So this is a gathering place for the community. and it's dual use, multi-purpose. And also we do understand that the maintenance of this facility is very important. We want to make sure that it looks good, that it's running properly, and that all the events that are held here are conducive to the playing fields and as well as the economic development that's around it as well. So as you can see, some of the use, we've got different activities, 4th of July, and of course we do have a couple months that might be a little bit of downtime due to maintenance and whatnot, but we definitely think that it's a great place that the community can use, and we feel in Public Works this will be a great facility for our use as well.
Member Souza, and then, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jennifer, in time, do you see us hiring a general manager to oversee this operation?
Actually, currently, the city is recruiting for a stadium manager position, and that person will be overseeing the facility and operations of this. We also know that we want the Indians involved in that process, as well as definitely key city staff. And if there will be someone that will go ahead and run just this facility, that will be their main duty and their main concern.
When we were closing out this deal with the Indians and the STA, we attended a meeting, basically of the STA, and a report was given by the manager of the operation of the University of Phoenix Stadium, and they asked him about the occupancy of the facility itself, and the occupancy there at that time was 90%. Well, that's a pretty good figure, and I'd like to see that occur here to alleviate the expense that we're incurring in this operation.
Absolutely. We want the facility to be used as much as possible, but again, in a way that makes sure that the maintenance and the fields and the rest of the facilities are still well kept as well.
Right. Councilmember Holland?
Just a question about the parks. You know, right now we have the Goodyear Community Parks, and we have several community parks around. But one that we've been holding a lot of the concerts and movie nights and that type thing. It has a smaller limit, a number of people that we can handle in that particular park. So I guess what I'm really asking is, you think we can fill up? I mean, it's going to be huge, our new park. It's going to be huge. We want to make sure that we can actually fill it up. Right now, we don't actually fill up the Goodyear Community Park.
Councilmember Holland, special events in the city have grown. Some of them have actually grown by about 200%. We're projecting that the 4th of July event for this year will have about 10,000 people actually in that park. And as you well know, it is a smaller facility. We have off-site parking. We did a lot of research talking to a lot of other cities that have stadiums, and they do run special events, Peoria, Surprise, Tempe, and this is a great venue for that, because as the city grows and our special events are already growing, they're going to continue to grow. And you'll actually be amazed to find out how much space that those events will take up, and shortly, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we might even outgrow those as well. So yes, I think that this will be a great place for the special events, and I think they'll be very well used and very filled up.
So we have about 10,000 that we think we can get in one of our smaller parks, and so in this particular park for our events, we could take in 50,000 maybe? No?
Well, that will depend on all the different type of parking that's around the facility as well. Generally, what they figure is about 3 people per car is a very good estimate of how many people travel, in a vehicle, so you can kind of gauge that. Also, there might be off-site transportation and shuttles involved, but it just depends. With the stadium itself, that's obviously a smaller venue, but with the practice fields, having that clover leaf, yes, you can fit quite a number of people. Peoria does their 4th of July event on the practice fields over at the stadium, and they have about 20 to 25,000 people.
Oh, okay.
And it's nice that you have a little bit of room for them to move around as well, so they don't look like sardines in a can. So it is nice to have a little bit of that extra room as well.
And this is just a quick one for Paula. How many people do we have at our balloon festival this year? 30,000, okay. Because it looks very crowded. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Osborne?
August, is that slated just because it's hot, or is it actually going to be a maintenance time for this setup?
More than anything with August, it'll be a heat issue just because of the fact it's an outdoor facility.
Right.
Yeah, the maintenance on that one, there's no overseeding done on that one for August, but yeah, it's basically just the fact that that sort of tends to be, even for Parks and Recreation, more of a planning month, just because of Arizona being so warm. Indoor facilities are better used at that time of the season.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Keith Hoskins, an attorney from Gus Rosenfeld, and I'm here to talk to you about the use agreement. The use agreement is basically the agreement between the team and the city for how the team will use the facility and the city's obligation to construct the facility, to cause the facility to come into being. And we presented a few of the key points on the slide. The first is that the agreement runs for 20 spring training seasons. So the actual, it's not really 20 years from tonight, it's 20 years of actual seasons. And the Indians have the right to extend it for 2 5-year extensions. The city will own the facility and hire the manager to manage the facility. And the Indians basically agree to use the facility. They agree to play 14 games, at least 14 games each season in the facility. The difficulty with this agreement is that we don't have a design yet. We don't have really specifications even. We have ideas of what it should look like and certain very basic lists that were in the MOU originally as to what this facility will be. But in this agreement, you're agreeing to build it, and they're agreeing to play in it, and no one really knows exactly what it's going to look like. So we don't want to agree to build something that is way too expensive. They don't want to commit to play in something that's a mess. So we've been working very closely with them, with the Indians, to basically agree in here to what the parameters are of what it is we're supposed to build, and provisions for consent and agreement between the parties, and for input where consent may not be appropriate, to have input from the Indians throughout all the processes. And that's really been the toughest part of this agreement. We now have a list basically of all these elements that have to be decided. What are the ticket prices? How many parking spaces? What's the maintenance standards that you're going to use? All of those things, we've had to go through that list and as best we can either describe it, set parameters for it, or provide for an agreement to parameters in the future. The agreement does provide for a nonprofit sponsor. As you know, other facilities have a nonprofit entity that helps run the facility or act as ushers and maybe get some charity revenues out of that. The team does pay $100,000 rent per year, which is certainly less than it costs to run the facility or to buy the facility, to create the facility. And the last piece of the puzzle is, as you know, we would like to add a second team, and so the agreement provides that it can be amended if and when we get a second team, so that all of the rights of the Indians and the city now move over a little bit and give room for the second team. Part of the site plan is based on the two areas, the ballpark area itself and the Indians training facility. They have a higher level of exclusive use on their training facility. On certain parts of it, even higher, certain parts of it less. They have higher control and consent over the design and the construction of their facility, somewhat less control, less exclusive use of the ballpark and the surrounding facilities there. If a second team was to come in, they would get their own practice facilities, training facilities with their own exclusivity, and yet they would be able to now share the ballpark. The agreement provides for all the scheduling of uses, the priority of when the Indians and for what facilities the Indians have priority, and when does the city have priority to schedule city events. To show you the agreement, which is the draft we got back from the Indians Council, the little red tags are those things that are somewhat problematic we have to discuss. For the most part, they might be, okay, that's okay, or no, tell them no, and we hope that'll do it. it's a lot less little red tags than we had last week, and I think we're very close to getting it wrapped up. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Councilmember Lord.
You did mention parking, and I know that was a concern for some of us as to how many parking spaces there would be around the main stadium. And I believe before you talked about the majority of them where the practice fields are. What was the outcome of that?
The agreement itself doesn't get that specific on those kinds of design elements, but perhaps someone.
So are we still saying that the majority of the parking spaces will be at the practice field? Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lord, that will absolutely be shared with you tonight on where the parking
I
spaces
just asked
will
it
be.
at the wrong time. Thank you.
You did, but the
State
answer
my
is
question.
there'll
You
be
don't
a
have
lot
to
more
answer it.
proximate to the ballpark now.
Just say it for the right person. It's okay.
Anything else?
Vice Mayor.
My concern is when the second team, because we will, I'm sure, have a second team eventually come to us. At this point, is it being worked out now how the second team's fields will be built? Who will be responsible for the financials on that? How is that worked out? And what do the Indians have to give up? And are they willing to move over and do this? I mean, I'm hearing you say that, but I'd like to hear them say that there is room for a second team, and that they will move or do whatever they have to do in the sharing, because we don't want that to become a conflict when that happens, if and when it happens.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the use agreement as well, so I can probably speak to that. And also very importantly from a design standpoint, as you've seen on the site plan many times, we have the space available for a second team, and that is the primary concern. So we have that, and your partners with the Wood Rose Group have addressed that with you in preserving that time, or preserving that space for a period of time. So that's the primary objective. Secondly is how the ballpark operates. And when a second team comes here, there's nothing that the Indians need to give up, because they're getting revenues from their games, where the other team will split the revenues with the city for their games. So there's no need to give anything up. The facilities are self-contained and self-sufficient. So the Indians, from their practice facility standpoint, will not have any impact of having a second team there.
So there'll be separate clubhouses,
everything. Separate parking. We're even talking about the maintenance facilities and how that might work to be the most efficient. So I think we're in great shape in that regard. And I think real importantly, too, and I'm going back to the Indians as partners, they have been very clear from the get-go that they want a second team. And they'll do everything they can to help us find that second team, if one ever emerges. And at this point, we really don't know. But they'll be strong advocates. And I will tell you, listening to them talk tonight, hearing them talk when they were here for the other approval, and also knowing what they say amongst their peers, they're singing the praises of this project. And I think they'll be great advocates for eventually getting a second team if there is one to be had.
Because we don't want any financial surprises hit us if and when the second team comes in. Right. Who's going to build those practice facilities for that second team? Right. The clubhouse, all the other things that go with it.
Right. Well, I think real importantly, the infrastructure that Rose is responsible for delivering, that's a separate project from the ballpark, and I know they're going to talk about that tonight. And it's real important that stay on track as well. So that schedule is as important as our schedule, and I know that there's real pressure for them to deliver that. So we can, in fact, I talked about the schedule of the ballpark, and we can't build the ballpark without the infrastructure being there. So there's real time sensitivity to that. But from an infrastructure standpoint as well, that has to be there to support the second team. And it will, in fact, be there. I can't address the financing issue. That's a whole other, and we don't have STA financing for a second team at this point in time, but we have everything we need to accommodate that second team from a planning standpoint. Okay, and an agreement standpoint with the Indians as well.
Yes. Chris, we're not actively looking for a second team, isn't that? Didn't we have an agreement that we could not actively look for a second?
No, we never agreed that we could not.
Well, I thought it was the STA, no?
No.
Okay, so we are able to do that at this time. Is that what you're saying to me?
That's a tough question to answer.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's best not answered right now, I think.
See, I'm 0 for 2, aren't I? I'll get one right this evening.
The next one's coming right down the
I
plate.
don't know.
Okay.
You know, there is one thing that I think really we want to emphasize, Keith, and that's city owns. City owns. There's another city that's probably going to build a facility, and they may not need to own it, but they aren't going to own it. The team is going to own it, and the team may give them 17 days a year to use it. This is the people's facility. Like Jennifer said, this is for us, the people of Goodyear. That's a big difference, I think.
I agree.
I agree with that.
We've got to emphasize that.
It's a hallelujah.
We need it.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, sorry for the change in the agenda. First off, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here tonight and present and answer your questions. I have a conflict later on in the evening, and so I have a very limited period of time, and I can stay here to approximately 6:40, and then I have to go to another municipality. So staff was kind enough to let me come up at this point for a few minutes, and I wanted to first introduce a few people because I'm sure that the discussion will go on beyond my ability to stay here. So representing our side of the team, in addition to Eric and Casey with Goodyear Baseball, is also Terry Matula, our Vice President of Development, who is in charge of this project, and also Dustin Jones with Tiffany and Bosco, who is handling our zoning on it. And although probably all of you know Joe Uhas from Reister. Reister has now joined our team as our public relations consultant for Ballpark Village at Wood Corporate Campus. With that, I will try to be very brief. And so I have a couple handouts that I want to use to illustrate some of the larger vision and some of the underlying driving forces to everything that we're talking about this evening. We are all excited about the ballpark and the Cleveland Indians. This is a magnificent thing. As the mayor said, it is the catalyst to getting city center going. It is also the catalyst to initiate a tremendous amount of economic development within the future city center area and Ballpark Village and Wood Corporate Campus. Thank you, Terry. Just let me have the honor of I attended a meeting today with staff, the Cleveland Indians, HOK Sport, and Goodyear Baseball, and I was tremendously impressed with what is happening at this point. There is magic that's going on right now behind the scenes. What I saw today was a tremendous opportunity for everybody to capitalize upon this one-of-a-kind ballpark environment to create this type of development that we are anticipating going on, at least in the north part of the project. And in the few short minutes, I just wanted to give you some bullet points on where we think we're going with the project while I have the opportunity to be here with you tonight. The ballpark is part of the North Campus, and that North Campus will have approximately 1 million square feet of mixed-use development that will include, in addition to the ballpark, office, we believe hospitality, retail, and also residential. We see this as being the first truly integrated, vertically integrated, mixed-use urban village in the West Valley, bar none. And so we are making initial progress right now in putting that together. Timing is very important. There have been questions asked of me on several occasions, how are we doing? Meaning, how are you progressing? And It's always inexact, but I will say that I am encouraged with some of the conversations that I'm having and the level of interest that I'm getting from potential partners on putting together the various components on the ancillary development. That ancillary development on the North 57 and also on the Southern 180 will yield, according to our consultants' estimates, approximately $173 million worth of economic impact to the city of Goodyear over the next 20 years. That does not include any capture of commerce associated with the ball games or events that would occur on the city property. That is just on the private development alone. So clearly, the purpose of investment, both from a public and a private side, is to create impact, create economic impact. We've heard various figures throughout. Every dollar of public development should stimulate 4, 5, 6 times that of private sector investment. I just wanted to share that with you, that we believe that that will occur here, and we're very, very excited about that. And the things that I'm seeing over the past few weeks, we're in the process of still putting together the agreements. I think that we are there on all of the deal points. The manager's office and our team has been working very closely on all of that. I see that we are essentially there. We need to do a little catch-up on the writing of the documents. And I just wanted to give you that quick report, and then if you have any questions of me, I'll be available for maybe the next 30 to 35 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I have one question, John, if I could. On the, this goes back to the other property that's available for the second team, those practice fields. How much time are you giving the city to acquire that second team, and when do you say enough's enough and we develop that into a retail or whatever we wish to develop it? Because aren't you setting that up as in a certain time frame, and then you will close the door on that, or is that open?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the question. The conditions of that have been memorialized in the Memorandum of Understanding. The city and Rose Properties and the Wood family have agreed to 24 months to give you an option at the current price for a 24-month period, after which we are free then to move ahead and develop the property. And in the PAD, we have reserved that area for adequate space for a second practice facility.
2 years, 24 months from what point?
I believe that it was the date of the Memorandum of Understanding, March 8th.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay, John, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to use the Elmo, if I could, to show you some maps. And you'll be getting these as part of your copy of the PAD when it's provided to you. This is the proposed ballpark village and Wood Corporate Campus. Ballpark Village being on the north with Wood Corporate Campus on the south. The PFD section that you see in the north parcel is where the ballpark will be. And the PFD in the south section is where the Indians Development Complex will be. Surrounding the ballpark will be the mixed-use development of retail, office, hotel, and residential. The remainder of the development outside of the development complex in the south will be primarily an office campus complex with retail on the far south. And as you said, hopefully, Vice Mayor, we'll have a second team that can go down there as well.
Nice.
This is a plan that shows you, it's their concept plan that shows the development in the mixed-use complex surrounding the ballpark. And this would be the office complex to the south of the development facility. It's assumed that the second team would have very similar facilities should they come along. And Councilwoman Lord, you mentioned the concerns that we voiced at the Planning Commission meeting, and the Planning Commission voiced those concerns as well. And one major concern we had dealt with the proximity of parking to the ballpark. We felt that the parking that was being provided was too far from the facility. I'm happy to say that's been worked out. The 1,000 spaces, the 1,000 paved spaces will now be up by the ballpark. Yep, we're very happy about that. In addition to 2,000 paved spaces also in the proximity. We do have one remaining issue related to parking, and that deals with the adequacy of the parking for the private development. In adequacy, we're okay in the beginning in terms of the parking that will be there to serve initial private development, and we're okay with build-out. They plan to use a shared parking model that, you know, the person who drives to the office will also go to the restaurant for lunch, so you don't need 2 parking spaces. So we're okay with build-out, but we're not okay yet with an incremental plan as to how the parking is provided for the retail development as it occurs. We are working on it. We've had several meetings. We've had several drafts go back and forth in terms of the information that's in the PAD and the steps that we hope to ensure the city's comfort level that the parking will be there as private development occurs. But I do need to be honest with you, we're not quite there yet. Everything else, we're very happy.
Thank you.
When you say we aren't there, you mean we aren't there technically, or we aren't there agreement-wise?
We're not there agreement-wise.
And what are the positions on that?
Well, as I said, there's going to be a certain amount of parking right up front that's going to provide parking spaces for the private development. And at full build-out, based upon the shared parking analysis that's been provided, and we like the idea of shared parking. You don't want too much parking. You don't want more than you really need. But it's that incremental provision of parking for the development that it comes along. And, you know, if certain parcels are sold off and those developers come in and they're standing at our planning counter saying, I want to build, and we're saying there's not enough parking, you know, there needs to be a way to ensure that that happens. And when you go from surface parking to structured parking, there needs to be triggers to make that happen. We need to work out those details still.
I'm sure the different uses will make a difference in the number of spaces also.
Correct.
I mean, at this point, we don't know what those uses are going to be.
We
can only hope.
Right. It depends on what comes in first. We have proposals in the PAD that deal with square footages for office space and number of residential units. So we have an idea of what's planned, but you're right. As it comes in, it's all going to affect how the parking is handled. We are still working based on the latest draft from the PAD information that was provided to us. We are still working on stipulations to handle our concerns and hopefully address our concerns.
So are we working to come to an agreement with Rose Properties or with whom? Is it?
Yes, it would be Rose Properties.
And we're right now not in agreement on parking in this incremental period.
Correct. As I said, in the beginning we're fine, in the end we're fine.
And when do we have to come to an agreement on that?
We need to come to an agreement. It was stipulated that these issues would be worked out, and the stipulation was endorsed by the Planning Commission that we work this out prior to consideration by council.
Which will be?
It's my understanding May 29th.
It's really important to work this out because if There's some nice business come in that wants to build, you know?
Right,
And
right,
they're-
and, you know,
they
and we
need
want
to-
it to
so
be
we need
successful.
Yeah, we want them to be successful.
Right,
To get them what they need.
right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I have another question. Maybe this complicates things a little bit. We still are with the concept that we want the parking to be established in places where, when you're walking from the parking area to the stadium, that you're going through the retail. That concept is still in place.
Correct.
So that it's not like some of these other stadiums where they park, go to the ball field, come back, go to the parking, and there isn't any, the retail's left.
Opportunity.
Yeah, the opportunity for retail is
Right,
gone.
right.
Now, with that, I see you have a parking area north within that Goodyear city center boundary. There seems to be a big parking.
That's
I don't know how
correct.
big that facility is. You've got other people coming in here from other developments that are going to build some kind of retail or something in that, whatever that parcel up there is going to be. The idea of this other retail person coming in, and it's Sun MP, so we might as well state who it is.
Actually, Vice Mayor, if I may, no,
Yeah.
this property right here that you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's part of this north parcel. That's part of the
I understand, but you've got a
57
parking lot there, right?
surrounded by commercial development, yes.
Yes, but that is not going to negate forcing the developer north to put in his equal share of parking.
Oh, when the Sun MP portion
Yes.
of the city center is developed? No,
Yes.
it will not. They will have to meet their own parking requirements.
So
as well.
they can't use this as part of their parking requirements. I guess that's the
And
one I'm
vice
trying to get
versa.
to. Right, for each zone. Okay, that's for calculations. They'll use it anyway, but, I mean, people are going to
I
use the
won't,
parking that's handy. But for calculations in these agreements, that can't be used.
Correct.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Are you going to talk parking, or?
Something else?
No, you can take that away, thanks. I'd like to clarify a few things on the question of shared parking, adequacy of parking, locations of parking at all. I believe there might be a misunderstanding because I thought we had agreed to the terms and conditions of the parking. So maybe I should just talk about what we've submitted and see if there's a common understanding. When we originally submitted the PAD and it was reviewed by Planning and Zoning, the request came back from staff and Planning and Zoning that it might be better to locate the parking in greater proximity to the ballpark rather than to the practice facilities. My response to Planning and Zoning at the time was we would be very willing to work with the city in locating that up there. We still maintain the position that there should be adequate parking for non-game events because I understand under the use agreement the city will have access to the use of certain practice facilities during the balance of the year, and therefore the majority of the use of the parking will occur during non-game uses. And so we thought that the parking should actually be further to the south. But at the request of staff and Planning and Zoning, we agreed in the spirit of cooperation and partnership that we would move it to the north. We did so.
We actually have an aerial of that. We could have the PowerPoint again.
Actually, I've got one right here if you want.
Okay, we also have that on PowerPoint. However you want to do that.
Okay. Doesn't matter if we want to do it on PowerPoint. Oh, cool. All right. Thank you, Brian. We did so also with the caveat that considering that the area around the ballpark in the North 57, once we convey the ballpark proper, that the balance of it is being used for private development, that the conveyance of that land would be under the stipulation that when we do bring forth private development, as long as we continue to provide the 3,000 parking spaces under the terms of the MOU, that we could get that private development area back quickly, enough time for us to be able to meet the private development needs. And so what we've done subsequent to that is we've created this diagram, which you are now looking at, and we have gone through and identified various areas that could accept this 3,000 stalls or whatever it might be, and the 1,000 paved stalls, hard surface stalls, that are being required under the MOU and the agreement with the STA. What we have here is parcel number 1, which is the big pink square, is ballpark, oversized to be able to give us flexibility in the next 120 days to be able to finalize the design, set the property line, and then both parties can then begin to construct individually what we need to do. Area number 6 was dedicated, was identified as the area that is proximate, most proximate, off-street parking for paved stalls for the ballpark, whether it be used for VIP or whatever is the city's business. That's directly across the street. Then what we did was we identified areas 3, 4, 5, and 7 to accept the balance of the hard surface parking, and then a good share of the non-paved parking. The balance of the non-paved parking occurs down number 8, which is in the southern parcel, proximate to the practice facilities. With that, the challenge that we have is that 3, 4, 5, and 7 is more land than is needed. So for the efficacy of getting this done on time, we try to describe 3, 4, 5, and 7 in a gross manner, and then come back in at a later date, and once we actually define the limits of the hard surface parking area, we would ask for reconveyance back of the pad sites so that we could develop the pad sites out. Now, when it comes down to shared parking, what we believe that we had agreed to was that, and I agree with staff, that there are 3 distinctly different conditions. One, which I've just described, day 1 pitch. The second one, or the third one, is at full build-out, which we believe that there is an adequacy of parking for the private sector development. Now, even at full build-out, the city still gets 3,000 dedicated stalls, and it is our responsibility to move those stalls from surface lots to structured parking as we phase through the development. And staff and Rose worked out a methodology in which to do that. At least I thought we did.
May I interrupt you at this point? So, but the question that keeps coming back to mind is yes, 3,000 spaces totally. But of those 3,000, are we going to have the majority of them that are going to be south of the stadium?
The answer is no.
Okay, that's...
The 3,000 stalls will be likely finalized in a structured parking in some configuration. Our best guess is based upon our current master plan, which distributes that parking amongst in parking structures in which a portion of those parking structures could be dedicated to event use and others for public use, or I'm sorry, for private development use, be it retail or office or some combination. Where they are, how much, is really a result of what land uses come in when it goes into a parking model and it gives us an answer. And we have to have faith in that parking model, because less that, we don't have any way of doing it. This is done all around the United States. Walker created this model. It is in use by many cities, including the cities of Scottsdale, Phoenix, and Tempe. So we think that we've got a good group that's kind of figured this out. They're smarter than I am. So in effect, I think what we have is a way that we can dedicate the stalls right now, define where those 1,000 stalls are, reconvey back the land so that we can develop it, and then as we bring in private development, we have the proof through site plan review and checking the model to always provide parking in some fashion to the city for the public facilities. Okay. Now, that's as simply as I can put it. I think if I go into any greater detail, I'm going to get confused. So there may be some other details that Terry might be able to address. Thank you.
Well, it sounded like we had a disagreement from you before, but do we or do we not, Brian? I guess.
Yeah, that's.
Mr. Mayor, this is an issue that staff has spent countless hours on. As Karen pointed out, this and it's been a concern of Planning and Zoning Commission. The short answer is we've looked at the Walker recommendations. We're looking at the shared parking. We're buying into the concept. But because it's so complex, we're putting zoning stipulations. I think, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're going to have 3 stipulations that we've agreed to in principle on, but it's not in the final document. So when Karen's comment is absolutely correct in that that issue is unresolved, but there's been verbal agreement on the concept. We've just not seen it in the documents for those zoning stipulations.
You know what you worry about is that are we going to need a big parking structure near that stadium, and who's going to pay for it? The city? So I have a little concern there, and I understand this is, nothing is done yet, so it's all kind of pie in the sky, and it's all what we're talking about is going to happen. But we also have to look out for our citizens, and when it's all said and done, and we paid the piper to have all of this, and then all of a sudden we'll find that's not going to work, so we're going to have to build a parking structure, and guess what? We're going to have to pay for it. So it's just a concern I have.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Lord, absolutely, it's been a concern of ours as well, and it's addressed in a couple of documents, one on the land conveyance that you'll hear from Scott Ruby in a few minutes, and then also, sir, I believe it may also be covered in development agreement portions of it as well, that requires us to still have 3,000 parking spots. I'll go through those details better than I can, but I think we're covered.
This will all be in writing, in agreement. That will be, supposing we're not there and Brian Dalkey isn't there and John isn't there, and supposing it's all different players. Now, we have to make sure that this is a tight agreement that's written, that everyone has agreed to, and that's solid and is firm.
There's a stipulation that says they cannot go away.
Well, it has to be an agreement that is signed in blood, I guess. But it has to be a pretty tight agreement. We have to know, everyone has to know the direction, and we have to know that right away.
Councilmember Lord asked who will fund the parking structure. That should probably be answered.
I was hoping someone might mention it.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the burden is on the developer, not on the city, to do that. The burden is on the city to pay for the initial 3,000. The burden is on the developer when we take that and we move it into structured parking. We have to build that, unless we come up with a different agreement, because we don't see certain conditions in the future with you for possibly public facilities or whatever on the site. So let me just clearly state that there's no schnooker in here that I'm,
It's just that we need to, John, cover our
I
bases on this. And I also worry is if it gets built, then do our citizens pay to park there? I mean, if you build it and it doesn't become a public parking, and so now part of those 3,000 spaces are going to be charged to the public. Those are just little
questions.
That's the
sometimes-
city's, that's up to the city's discretion. It's not our,
Okay.
it's not really our parking structure.
If I may, this is all agreements that have to be worked out. The attorneys have to take care of this. And I hope that this will all be worked out. It's not something we can sit here and talk about. It's something that has to be set up by these attorneys with the agreement that everything is going to be okay. And it's all going to be signed and sealed so that when this happens, we know that it's okay. I mean, we can talk about all the details tonight if we want, but that doesn't cut any, it just doesn't. It just doesn't do it. And we can't talk about this because we don't know where those agreements are and what has to be done. And that has to be worked out with you guys. So we just hope that that is worked out before there's any problems.
But we aren't here
we
to talk
hope
about
so,
agreements.
too.
That's why we're meeting tonight.
Why we're here.
I understand, but not in the details of what's in the agreements, that, to the point that, I mean, I don't care what's in the agreements as long as it's agreeable and it meets the code and it meets the standards for the STA and the city and the needs for our citizens. So,
Can I ask you a question, John?
Certainly.
You got 3, 4, 5, 7, those numbers?
Yes.
Okay, are those, okay, so that's level land, and we're going to put parking in those, and I guess we'll design the parking, we'll paint the parking lines and that. Is that part of the land that we're buying? Is that correct? Yes? Okay, now, John and Rose, they're going to build us a structure, right? So, right? So it's going to take a lot less land. And what happens to that land that we bought? How is that conveyed now? Is that
I'd like to know who said yes to that question. I hope that is
The
not
attorney.
somebody on my side.
Your attorney. Your attorney.
What the city is purchasing is the ballpark, the land for the ballpark, and the land for the practice facilities, and we are conveying enough land to build 3,000 parking stalls. Because this is a mixed-use development.
would you define convey for me?
Yeah, Scott, come on up. I'm sorry, we're close.
Sorry, I get bumped from the agenda down below to talk about dirt and sewer pipes, so shows you where I've been relegated to. Scott Ruby with Gus Rosenfeld. Let me just briefly, number one, we're not bringing polished agreements to you this evening. We're trying to demonstrate how far we've come in this process, and there still are open issues. The reconveyance and the parking issue, as I told you from the very beginning of this transaction, is going to be the most difficult issue to deal with, together with the interface of that private development in the ballpark. We are still working on those concepts, all right? The whole interface issue on the 9.4 acres also involves reconveyance concepts, where we have a particular area of land conveyed to the city upon which we build a ballpark, but we may not need for the operation of that ballpark at a subsequent time. We need to reconvey that back in an expectation that it will be privately developed and maximize our other goal in this project, which is to maximize private development in and around that area. The parking for our $6,250,000 is being purchased. Those lots, we're going to buy 75 acres of land. That'll include the practice facility, the ballpark site, and the parking sites. Now, what happens when that surface parking on day one gets converted to structure parking? Well, we probably will, Mayor, reconvey that property, but we will get, as I mentioned in the MOU, I think early on in a description, an irrevocable interest of some type, either fee or some type of irrevocable perpetual easement in that parking structure. So in essence, you've traded maybe a surface fee title interest in a flat lot for a perpetual interest in a structure. In my mind, they're equivalent from our functional standpoint, certainly, and from probably a value standpoint, and maybe even more valuable given the fact it's structured. So there will kind of throughout the history of this, there will be that parking element which is either dirt or either a structure, but we will have a permanent interest in one or the other sufficient for 3,000 spaces. Now, I can tell you, we're still working on these reconveyance concepts, all right? We don't have a formula yet as to when they're reconveyed and what the criteria is for the reconveyance. We've hashed around some concepts. We heard some more concepts from Rose this afternoon. We still need to discuss it. We're going to finish that, and we're going to come to some sort of an agreement so we can bring these agreements back to you on the 29th with those issues settled, at least our suggestion, and then we'll present them at that time.
Well, I just think it's important, though, that the questions are asked now.
I think this is an important thing to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we could wait till that comes back to us. And you
we're buying the
wouldn't be happy
land,
with that. No.
and we're going to reconvey it back to you. We just need to know that.
That's right.
Functionality being equal is great, but we still need to know that we bought land we're going to reconvey back. However you do that, is still open for consideration. Correct?
I told you I was bumped on the agenda, Mayor. I was going to go over all that. You're absolutely right. We were going to bring it up tonight. We are bringing it up tonight because we do want you to know. Because it is, as I said, the most difficult concept in this transaction is this whole squiggly line that exists relative to parking and the interface of private development on that ballpark site.
One more question before. Are all these lots going to be paved?
No.
And how do we explain that to MAG, ADEC, and EPA in a world of PM10 problems? When we have to cut, all right, PM10 emissions 5%, we're going to lose $1 billion over 3 years. Why would we contribute to the PM10 problem? Or are we putting some other layer on this?
Mayor, members of council, STA requires 1,000 and 3,000 to be paved, and so certainly with
Oh, it's
respect
not
to
an
the
STA
1,000.
issue.
Well, no, I understand that. With respect to the dirt lots, I assume, and I'm looking to, is it Raul, would you have that answer? I assume we are going to comply with PM10 and that we won't jeopardize.
So they're going to be paved? We're going to have a layer?
Oh, they
Sprayed or
will
sprayed
have
with
some
something.
sort of dust retardants
What is the
on
spray
them
called?
that will
Have a
comply,
surface, some kind.
that will comply with the law. All my engineers over there are just kind of staring back at me, pretty reassuring.
Mayor, Council, it'll either be gravel or turf. So that's how we comply with the PM10 requirements.
Okay. Gravel, that will comply?
As long as it doesn't have dirt in it.
It's either gravel with a slurry mix, not necessarily pavement mix, and that will settle the dust. And so that would be one form of dust control.
What was the substance they talked about at the air show? We had sprayed on the dirt so many weeks before, which would have hardened the surface and a lack of dust. What was?
That was the organic dust powder.
And that lasts for how long?
It depends on the average about 6 months.
6 months. I guess that would be a cost, looking at what is cheaper in cost.
Correct.
Filling it up with gravel or spraying it?
The palliative additive in some instances requires a reapplication every 3 months.
Oh, sometimes.
So that's part of the financial analysis in terms of the cost of maintenance.
Thank you.
As strange as this may seem, the disagreement that we thought we had is not really a disagreement at all. We were, in effect, both right on this. The reason being is that I agree with Scott that the city is purchasing 75 acres that will include the parking lots. But what I was referring to was on this document here. Oh, before I go to that, that 75 acres includes the 9.4 acres that you see on the screen, plus the areas outlined in red, which is sufficient space to be able to park it. Prior to that, what we're going to convey out of simplicity and timeliness is a larger area of 3, 4, 5, and 7. So not all of that area is being purchased. So it's a function of timing and when we convey and when we reconvey back out. But I do agree with Scott that the city is purchasing it, and I do also agree that when we go into to use that to put a parking structure on it, you'll notice that it's all
those lots are co-located with future parking structures, that when we go through to build a building that requires a parking structure, we're going to build that parking structure, and then the city's going to have access to that parking structure per the terms of the MOU, the 3,000 stalls.
Thank you.
We're saying the same thing, we're saying it in slightly different ways.
Which are the paved and which are the non-paved parking? None of those around retail are non-paved, are they?
Excuse me, when you...
Yeah, 3, 4, 5. Are those all?
7.
None of those are paved?
Only 6.
3, 4, 5 are partly paved, partly is grass because they need to be landscaped, there needs to be retention in there. And none of those are being used for retail at this point because there is no other development other than the ballpark.
Okay.
Further questions?
As we were saying, it's not an easy thing to get through. Sometimes it gets a tad complicated.
You want us to sit here?
That's okay.
Thank you.
You guys got to work out the agreement and bring it to us.
So are you finished too, Scott, or do you have more for us?
Well, I'd like to be there, but I think I actually have some more if you want to hear from me.
Sure do.
Okay. Is that where we want to go, land conveyance? All right, let me talk about that if I can just briefly. My partner Frank Tompkins is here, and he's a real estate expert, and he has a lot of experience in dealing with these kind of mutual use scenarios. Deals a lot in leasing and deals a lot in site development that involves major department stores and all the retail tenants you see out and those kind of things. So that experience will be brought to bear on this, and I hope in a successful way. The agreement for the conveyance of real property is really quite simple. As you look on your map, what we are going to receive for the $6,250,000 are the green spaces there shown as parking lots. The ballpark site shown there, and it's squared up together with an access point out on Wood Boulevard. The red parking spot across from the ballpark, as you can see. The green parking space on the southern parcel, and then the practice facility shown in blue. Those are the areas technically we're paying for $6,250,000. And again, as John mentioned, that totals more than 75 acres. And so if there is a way to get 3,000 parking spaces in the green areas, and there is a way to pare down that ballpark site, we're going to do so through that reconveyance concept, but we will never go below 75 acres. All right. Together with the conveyance of the parking areas, the ballpark site, and the training facilities, the MOU has always required, and it's really not part of the $6,250,000 exchange because it is a requirement just for the sake of development. But they will dedicate the rights of way that you see there in whatever color that is. What is that, like a pink? Salmon, sorry. Yeah, all right. Light red. So it'll be the Goodyear Boulevard, the urban core streets that you see there that really are adjacent to the ballpark. The access from the ballpark out to the northern reach of Wood Boulevard. Wood Boulevard is that interior street that comes down. I think you can see that. And then Bullard Avenue along the eastern edge of the practice facility, extending all the way down to Australia Parkway. And then also on Australia Parkway, Phase 3, as we'll see in the infrastructure agreement, there'll be conveyance of an additional lane along Australia Parkway. The final, you see a yellow line there that kind of leads directly into the practice, kind of splits where the practice facilities might be if you had a second team. That is actually an easement. They will convey that easement to us, and it will be for all practical purposes, a road that will allow direct access from Australia into that training facility. But that's not necessarily a dedicated right-of-way. So that is the depiction. Those are the parcels that we intend. And as you can see, at this early stage, what we're trying to do is get all this kind of wrapped up. And because the agreements need to be and are out in front of the actual design, we can't be that precise. But from a city standpoint, we want to make sure we're on the conservative side or the plus side of precision, so that we make sure that we do have a right to be on that property building a ballpark or building practice facilities. And certainly the agreement and the legal descriptions will reflect that. And Rose Property's been very cooperative in helping us get to this solution. As you can see, too, the majority of the parking is on the northern parcel. That's a request and a concern of the STA, the Indians, the city, and virtually everyone. So that I think that's a substantial change from what you saw in the very original site plans. And I don't know the lot count to know the percentage split, but I'll bet it's at least 80-20. 73% north.
That's much better than it was.
Yeah, so about 70, Sarah said 73% north, which is a few other of the highlights on the infrastructure agreement. Again, we in some respects, it's just a standard real estate purchase contract. There's going to be a feasibility period wherein we look at the title reports, the environmental reports, et cetera, with respect to these parcels. There's provisions in there for reciprocal easements that we're going to have to grant, because once we do get down to the ballpark site, or once we get in and around perhaps a parking area with an adjacent private use, we're going to have some mutually used areas, and so we're going to need some reciprocal easements where we allow each other to go on each other's property or allow our pedestrian traffic, et cetera. Maybe some mechanical needs or utility needs that may have to occur in those areas, and we'll certainly have easements that will reflect that and run in favor of both sides. The option on the bottom piece for a second facility is also contained in the agreement for conveyance. So we preserve that concept which we had in the MOU. We preserve that in this agreement. Now, as I mentioned before, the real wrestling match on this, both practically and obviously from a business standpoint, has to do with the reconveyance elements of these parcels. And once again, because we are early on and needing to get started and needing to, transfer some monies and that sort of thing, we are being generous in the sizing of these sites so that we can make sure from a city perspective we can build what we need to build. But we fully recognize, too, that we want to promote private development to the greatest extent possible and consistent with our ability to own, operate, and maintain a freestanding facility that has access, pedestrian and vehicular, to all the facilities we constructed. So you play those two interests against each other, and you're going to have some land that's going to flow one way or the other. What we anticipate is, and we need to work on, and we will by the 29th have ironed this out, we need to have that criteria for the reconveyance. And so with respect to the parking, the reconveyance timing of that and the reconveyance criteria will be established and set forth in the agreement. We have some language in there right now. We just need to continue to talk about it and polish that. Parking's a little easier right now at the day one stage and the reconveyance stage than it is around the ballpark. So there is also going to be discussion in there about the reconveyance of the property in and around the ballpark. And that's the real difficult one, because it's right now, there are experts in this area that probably could tell you how much space you need for a ballpark, but every ballpark has its own unique design elements to it, and you don't know where pedestrian flows coming to or going from, and so consequently you don't know exactly those locations where you might need more space or less space. So we have to work there on when exactly would we convey a portion of that red square back to the private developers so that they can do their thing. Now, also, they're out there actively trying to market this, and we want to certainly encourage that. So we may be working on those types of transactions of the reconveyance earlier rather than later. I mean, if they're out there trying to build or trying to get started or trying to make a sale for a user, we're going to have to sit down and try to figure out how we draft language that maybe accommodates that type of early need. But we'll do that, and we'll have that for you by the 29th. I'm sure we can have a meeting of the minds on that. Any questions on that? No. Otherwise, I'll move to the pipe part of this.
Questions? No?
All right. The next agreement I get tagged with is the infrastructure agreement, which is, you remember, the background on this was the MOU provided that Rose Properties and the Wood Family Enterprise elements would construct all the infrastructure on the Wood campus, basically because the majority of the infrastructure there was going to be needed for their private development. The ballpark certainly needed some, and needed some early, so part of this agreement was, okay, you, Woods and Rose, are responsible to build the infrastructure needed for this ballpark spring training complex, but because you're doing private development, you can do the whole thing. The city agreed in the MOU to reimburse them for up to $10 million worth of public infrastructure that went in and around and basically served the complex or was located on the Wood property. They are, both the city folks and the Wood folks have gotten together and determined what infrastructure is needed in order to serve the spring training facility together with the private development. And you see on the map before you that I'm staring at here the particular roadways that are going to be installed by Rosewood and for which we may pay up to $10 million. As you can see, there's Bullard, there's the Wood Boulevard extending all the way from Australia up to Goodyear Parkway. There's Goodyear Parkway, there's the urban core streets, there's Lower Buckeye Road, and there's Australia Parkway when built. The color shows the phasing of those improvements. As you can see, the yellow, I believe, is Phase 1, the blue is Phase 2, and then Phase 3 is the Australia Parkway. Specifically, the yellow in Phase 1, there's a couple of details there that are that's in the infrastructure agreement. With respect to Lower Buckeye Road, the city will be responsible for taking down the median and milling that road down. And I believe Rose is then coming in and putting the final layer back on. The city is also responsible because the city will be at the installing a major sewer line in the Bullard Road alignment. The city then, because they are already in that alignment and because that roadway will need some grade work, because as you know, Bullard Wash is right next to it, it will need to be brought up, especially along the practice facility and maybe just along the practice facility. It needs to be brought up to some degree. So the city, in connection with the installation of that sewer line in Bullard, will be using that excess dirt in order to bring the subgrade of Bullard Avenue to its appropriate level. So from that standpoint, the city is bearing that infrastructure cost as part of really the installation of the sewer. Rose will then take that finished subgrade preparation and build the road from there up. Now that road is ultimately scheduled for a 6-lane road. Rose will only be required to build the 4 lanes, the 2 outside lanes on each side, plus the median. There's also a little bit of right-of-way down there along along Bullard, where it intersects into Australia that the city will need to acquire. I don't know if that's called Elwood Street or not, but we need to acquire some there. It is? Elwood, okay. And then we lastly are working with Sun MP to bridge that little gap there on the Wood Boulevard, and I think Sun MP is fully cooperating, and we expect that that's not an issue, and consequently Rose will build Wood Boulevard even across that Sun MP portion.
You're talking about the bridge across Bullard
Wash?
That's not in my agreement, so let me ask Brian a question. The question was, what about Bullard Wash?
No, that's, okay.
Mayor, Council, I believe Scott was talking about the middle section, the north-south section.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted clarification on. Was he talking about the middle section?
He's talking about the middle section, correct.
Okay.
That extends the Wood Boulevard between the northern and the southern parcels.
And the Goodyear Boulevard will be 4-lane?
Goodyear Boulevard will be improved for the entire section, 6 lanes.
I mean, eventually, in total, though, it will be a, 4-lane?
You're talking about Goodyear Boulevard on top?
Yes,
as part of
on the top.
That's 6 lanes. It's 6 lanes from Estrella all the way to, actually, their limits of property, and then staff will extend the Goodyear Boulevard up to Yuma Road as part of a separate CIP project.
Right, that's part of, that isn't part of this Woods project then?
It's only part from Estrella Parkway up to the northern limits of the property.
Okay, northern limits there.
Right.
And they're responsible for the 2 outside lanes plus the...
We're doing all 6 lanes as part of this infrastructure agreement.
All right, good.
Together with these roadway improvements, we'll obviously have all dry and wet utilities located, in the thereabout. So sewer and water will be there, affluent lines, the cables, gas, all those sorts of things. The one infrastructure agreement has one section devoted strictly to electricity because that is an issue in this area. As you know, ultimately the area will require a little boost in power. It's anticipated that the timing of a substation together with maybe some transmission facilities down from that substation to this area may exist at the time we need it to exist. If it doesn't, then Wood Properties will install the necessary infrastructure to allow us to hook into the existing grid and pull power from that existing grid. Now, we're assuming in that context that the power will be there. Obviously, if some significant user came in and sucked it dry, and I don't think that's a power term, but illustrative of what the point I'm making. We obviously would have to make some sort of arrangement to get power down there.
Now, that's all underground.
It is anticipated on all our roadways that we have ductwork there that puts it underground. I believe that's correct, right? So there's a little discussion in the infrastructure agreement with respect to power. As I mentioned, we are reimbursing them for up to $10 million of public infrastructure. I emphasize public because we don't pay for cable or APS and that sort of thing. They understand, too, that much like your CFD processes, that public infrastructure will need to be publicly bid, and so they'll follow the requirements that the city has in its code and basically Title 34. So with respect to all that money, it will be spent on publicly bid contracts.
Scott, do you feel that the APS delivery system to that area is going to be adequate to supply power to the type of light structure that we're going to have in the park itself?
I'm just the Scrivener, Mayor, Councilmember Sousa.
And I don't want us to get into a situation, we ought to be dealing with APS right now, tell them what the needs are going to be, and I'm sure that the team will do that.
Yeah.
But I don't want this to come into a situation where we're going to have to be able to build a substation later on and affect some type of development. And we've gotten into that in the past, and we promised that we wouldn't do that in the future. And I'm just concerned with the type of power that we're going to need to supply the lighting in the park itself, that it might require additional wattage coming into the park itself, and that would require a substation. So maybe we better discuss the situation with APS now and get their understanding, or get our understanding of what they're going to need in the area.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Sousa, that you've been sneaking in on our sessions because we have.
I haven't attended your sessions.
Well, you must have been listening through the wall because the APS and the power scenario has been discussed extensively in just a few meetings I've been involved with it. But I know just from those meetings that it is almost a number one priority discussion item. I know that the Rose folks and Terry and Mike on their side have been in contact with APS almost from the get-go. They saw that as the issue, and certainly approached APS. I know our side, Regis Reed and others, have been in contact with APS trying to get their arms around this. APS, I know, is aware of what's going on. One thing the infrastructure agreement does have, it has some time periods in there where the city is, for example, in 60 days required to provide Rose with the utility loads that we expect to occur from not only some oversizing or some uses up in other areas over by the airport, but also our own facilities, and that obviously would be done in conjunction with HOK. They will then take those utility loads in order to size their infrastructure, not just power, but all utilities. The discussions with APS clearly will utilize those utility load estimates, and we will be in discussion with them. It's my understanding that APS already acknowledges they will need a substation, that they will pay for a substation. The question then is how to get that power down, the transmission, and I understand that there's a number of property owners in this area in and along that transmission line that will benefit and consequently are all coming together to pay an allocable share of that cost. So I think that's everybody's expectation, is that power scenario will come into being over the next couple years in time for our facility. If it doesn't, however, that is why we have this backup provision that Rose can hook us into the existing grid. And again, I believe right now, and Brian's the power guy, so he could talk much more intelligently on this than I can, but I believe there's enough power in that grid right now that it's pretty reasonable to assume that the uses that come into that area will not drain it to the point where we cannot have night games, for example. So I think we feel pretty comfortable on that, but that is a very preliminary comfortableness, and we are continuing to work with APS and continuing to make that a very high priority. Thank you. Is Eric going to have a comment?
So don't give away our flashlights. Is what you're saying.
Well, day games are a pleasant thing, so we can't. No, I don't make light of it because it is a very, very serious issue, and I know that they're very anxious about the whole matter. Just one or two other points on that infrastructure agreement. As I mentioned, it will speak to these time schedules. There is a financial assurance provision in there which basically says that in the course of the 60 days and then 60 days later, we have to provide them with some scheduling and that sort of thing and what are the utilities we need. But out of that process, we're going to develop an estimate. And that estimate then will kind of obviously be an estimate of the total infrastructure cost that we're requiring to be built. We will require, and Rose has agreed to post a letter of credit equal to 105% of the cost of that infrastructure, less $10 million, because we don't need it for $10 million because we have the $10 million. So if that comes in at $20 million, they'll put a letter of credit up within 5 days of getting that estimate, which we expect to occur about the 120th day. They'll put a letter of credit up for that differential. If it's $12 million, it'll be a $2 million letter of credit. Okay, so that way we believe we'll have the financial security and assurance there that in the event things kind of headed south on us, we would have sufficient funds to draw upon in order to build that.
And the agreement with water and sewer with the city, that's all taken care of. We're all covered on that.
Yes, the water lines, sewer lines, et cetera, affluent lines are all part of the infrastructure to be constructed primarily in those roadways. And with that, that's probably enough on pipes and dirt, unless you have questions.
What will be the water source to be used for the 6.5 practice fields in the stadium?
I believe we want to use I believe you want to talk to the Water Resources Director.
Mayor, members of the council, we are looking at effluent as the primary source. We were hoping to meet with the team today, but as you've heard earlier, they're still working on some of the agreements, so Water Resources will have a point in the agenda at a later date where we can start to talk about effluent and then other types of use for that. Quality is going to be an issue. Major League Baseball is going to have some standards, the different types of grasses the mayor spoke of earlier, so we're going to need to take all of those into consideration. But it's our goal to use effluent anywhere we can within that corporate campus.
Okay, thank you. How much longer do we have here, Brian? Because does people want a break if we're going to hang around a bit longer?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
We're going to be here another, how long?
Oh, well, let's finish it.
Let's do it, yeah.
10 minutes? Let's make it.
Mayor and council members.
Dinner date.
We'll hold the questions.
Well, I had the easiest part of the whole presentation. I'm just talking about the development agreement, but the real difficult pieces have been addressed in the discussions of the land conveyance and the infrastructure agreement. So what I did was just kind of highlight the main points of the development agreement. We have the term for 20 years. The agreement provides for expedited review procedures related to requests for infrastructure are addressed in the infrastructure, but this has to do with the private development. Again, the city's goal is to do what it can to expedite getting the private development out of the ground. That's where we're going to benefit as a city. So we are going to designate a staff member from planning, engineering, and development to kind of oversee the requests that come in with respect to private development. We're going to use our best efforts to expedite the reviews within timeframes associated with our expedited review process throughout the city. Again, we don't want to commit to specific timeframes because we always get into trouble when we do that. But we have a partnership with these guys, and we think this will work out fine. And to the extent that we use the expedited review process, the developer owners have agreed to pay for any additional expenses we use outside plan reviewers, that sort of thing. They'll pay for that. The vesting, the development agreement contains a vesting provision. We are vesting the developer and the owners to develop this property in accordance with the PAD and the ordinances, rules, regulations, and other requirements that are in effect as of July 1st, 2007. We picked the July 1st, 2007 because we'll be bringing forward an ordinance in, I think, next council meeting for council to consider adopting updated uniform building codes. So those will be in effect July 1st. What this means is that the city can't apply any kind of new ordinances, rules, or regulations that would affect the development except for mandatory requirements that are imposed on the city by the federal, state, or county, or if there's some kind of court decision that interprets an existing law that requires us to change. We do have the right to increase any kind of ordinances that impose taxes, fees, including our development fees, filing fees, review fees. We also have the ability to modify and updated building safety codes, and obviously anything that the parties agree to. With respect to the infrastructure, the developers and owners are responsible for constructing all of the infrastructure that's necessary to serve the private development and the stadium complex, the spring training complex. But the agreement's very sparse in that it basically incorporates our infrastructure agreement because those specifics are laid out there. And I would reiterate that Rose has agreed to financially secure the construction of the infrastructure. So we know, we have a very good feeling that within 2 years, all that infrastructure we need for the baseball stadium complex will be in the ground. The owners would be asked to extinguish and convey their water rights to the city for $25 per acre foot, which is what we standardly apply. And that would be used to offset the water resources development fees that are applicable to this property. I think this was what Vice Mayor Cavalier was talking about, and that's the Bullard Avenue Bridge. We, in conjunction with just the development of Wood Corporate Campus and the baseball, we had agreed to realign the Bullard Avenue Road so that it ran adjacent to the wash. Doing that increased some bridge costs over Bullard Wash. The owners and developers will be asked to contribute $750,000 to the increased costs of the Bullard Avenue Bridge. That payments, they would make that contribution in 3 payments. $100,000 would be 3 years, paid 3 years from the date of the agreement, $150,000 the next year, and then the balance of $500,000 in the 5th year. We will address parking in the development agreement, and it will mirror the agreements that are reached in the land conveyance and in the zoning case. So, you know, again, it will, we have a lot of extensive discussion about what we anticipate to see, but that language hasn't been finalized. In addition, we have a developer contribution of $5 million towards enhancements to the spring training complex. We don't know what that form of those contributions will be or the enhancements because we're pretty far along in the process. But for instance, if we've designed the stadium because of budgetary constraints and we have minimal landscaping and they want to come in and pay additional money for enhanced landscaping, you could look at that. You could look at maybe features like art features. You could look at maybe traffic roundabouts that would kind of enhance the walkability of that whole project. So the parties will be getting together in 120 days to kind of identify the sorts of features that would go towards that $5 million.
But the developers are paying that?
Yes. Yes. And again, it will benefit, obviously it will be benefiting the private development, but it will also enhance, because of where we're located, we're kind of their centerpiece, it will enhance the stadium complex as well. And the last part is the sales tax reimbursement. Again, we'll be coming forward and asking to pay the developer $5 million in retail sales tax to be paid over the life of the agreement, 50% of the retail sales taxes for restaurants, bar sales, retail sales, hotels, and transit occupancy, be up to $5 million. This obligation would be contingent upon the completion of the infrastructure needed for the spring training. And it's really being offered, well, it was addressed in the MOU. I think you've heard a lot about what the city is getting from this deal. And when we first came in, we're getting a lot of land at a very fair, if not, I believe, under market value for the land. We're getting probably anywhere from $5 to $7 million in contribution for infrastructure costs. They're putting in all of the infrastructure that will support the baseball stadium as well as their private development. We're contributing $10 million towards that. So when we brought this agreement to you originally as the MOU, it was kind of a package deal, and so the $5 million sales tax reimbursement was there. If you get down to the numbers, you might have been able to justify higher land value and just paid, say, a $6 million initial payment and $5 million over time. You could have justified it by infrastructure costs, like with West Core, because they're putting in so much infrastructure. But we didn't have those numbers available, so we just went for the $5 million contribution from sales tax revenues that will be paid out. But it's kind of, again, the bundle of benefits, but we'll be bringing that financial analysis to you in conjunction with this agreement as part of that.
So just to make sure that I'm understanding it, we give them $5 million, and we actually get that money back over. Is that how it works?
The $5 million will be paid out of the sales tax that's earned from the private development in that ballpark village, and we'll pay 50% of that, up to $5 million.
For what time frame?
Over the entire agreement, 20 years.
20 years.
Obviously, it's in their best interest, and their goal is to get that money sooner rather than later.
Yeah, because is it in the city's? Is it in the city's best interest to be short term? Less than 20 years.
Right. It would be.
But there's no guarantee.
But there's no guarantee that they'll have that development. I mean, we're looking at a lot that has to go on before that private development is going to come out of the ground, although I know that they're already looking at an office building.
Sure.
Is that unusual to have an agreement that long, 20 years?
I really can't say. We haven't done that many incentive agreements. And again, this was more in conjunction of a whole package of benefits that we were getting. We could have said, hey, give us $11 million or $18 million for the land, or $11 million, pay us $6 million now, and $5 million out of the retail sales tax, and we wouldn't have cared. But we just didn't have the breakdown of all of that at the time we were looking at the MOU. But we are getting incredible value in terms of our land costs, the acquisition costs. We are getting incredible value for the infrastructure that they've committed to putting in. And then we don't pay this till their development is out of the ground and generating income from the city as well.
So you feel this is kind of a fair deal then so far as, because what we're getting
I think it's a very fair deal for the city.
because we're really getting this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they've really done a lot for the city in terms of bringing this deal forward. So, you know, if they take 20 years, yeah, we'd like to see it sooner. Everybody wants to see it sooner.
Thank you. It just seems like such a long time when we say it, that that's
It
why.
does, you know, and it depends. I mean, if they get their hotel up, which I think is one of their priorities, they'll start generating income right away.
So they could do it in 10 years.
Oh, they can do it a lot sooner. It just depends on what the market will bear and who comes in.
Doesn't take long to get that much.
Does the sales tax reimbursable include construction sales tax?
No. Nor lease tax, Mayor. I'm the closer. I know we promised we'd get you out of here, so I'll throw 3 pitches. Hopefully we're done. This is one I just wanted to emphasize, though, and Sarah went over it, is the land value was, that $18.75 million was done by actually an assessment by Trammell Crow. They said that the going price for land, it went anywhere from $5 to $7.50 per square foot, edging up toward $10 a square foot. We placed value at $5.74 a square foot, which is on the lower end of the comparables that were given to us by Trammell Crow. So this is definitely a science, not an art. And then just real quickly, the only reason we wanted to show this is if you just look at dollars without all the development that's coming around the ballpark, just based on the dollars, the city is absolutely ahead on the benefits for this project. The last slide I have, and then I'll close, is this one, and John verbalized it, but in addition to those dollars, here's what they're looking at putting in Ballpark Village. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see 1.78 million square feet of building that's going in this area. You can see the types of uses going in there. In addition, with the structured parking, what Rose is putting in is 1.9 million square feet of parking, so that's about almost 6,300 parking places. So if you look at the total building square feet as well as the parking, that runs those development costs on their nickel, $385 million. These are the things that are going to be looked at by Applied Economics, which is doing a third-party independent study. And that will be coming back before council. So we'll weigh in that previous slide with the dollars, as well as the expected developments that are going in there. So it's a lot of information we've thrown at you tonight. I wish you could really see the many things that have been agreed upon. We have a couple pinch points and we're almost done. And I think you saw those tonight. So we have every expectation. We're still coming before council on May the 29th. So thank you.
Further comments, questions?
No, I'd just like to thank you for the presentation. I really like to thank staff for all their hard work put in this, and Brian, and particularly the hours you've been putting into this. Thank you.
Thousands of hours, and if everyone just stood up before we walk out of here that's been involved in it as we're finishing
Why
up.
don't they stand up?
It's an incredible amount. All the staff. Okay,
Come on.
Plus 3 attorneys from Gus Rosenfeld. And then the entire Rose Group. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Souza?
Yeah, I just want to say here, you know, from what I heard this evening, just envisioning what's going to be in the next 2 to 10 years, this is going to be the gem literally of the valley. And I think that everybody in the city at the present time should be proud of that. And Brian, I don't think anybody deserves any more credit than you do, the way you directed this. I personally appreciate it. And I'm positive the council feels the same way as I do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll let you comment too, just because we know you guys are working hard, and we know that there have been a lot of other folks that have worked on this project that are kind of really behind the scenes. I see Raul back there, and I see Sean sitting over there. I know everyone's touched this project, and I just want you guys to know that we know how much fun you're having with this. So it's fun to us, and we're excited about it.
Brian, the next time you're going to be before us on this is the 29th, is that correct?
Yes, Mayor. We will be having, we may have one of the documents, a use agreement with the Indians on the 14th. If not, all the documents will be coming before. The goal is May 29th.
Okay, when you do, could you have from Rose, a reasonable expectation that on 1 March '09, we'll have a stadium, we'll have practice fields, and what else will be vertical? 1 March of 2009, okay?
Okay.
Okay, that's, any other comments? City manager, any comments or questions? Okay. One thing, we can all certainly deserve praise, but the essential element here is character. JMI, Wood, Rose, Cleveland Indians, City of Goodyear. We've come together as people of value, and we're going to have a valuable result. So let's hang in there for another, quite a while yet.
Like a couple of years.
This meeting's adjourned.